Alright, so I wanted to talk about this for a while, and I know a lot of you guys have been asking me to talk about this, so now that we have a free day today, we're going to do it. So we're talking about Sukuna's ultimate purpose in Jujutsu Kaisen, which is, I guess, to become the final boss of the Culling game. And that in itself leads to Kenjaku's ultimate goal in the series, which is to end the world. It's not that simple, of course, but let's just get into it. So this all really started to click in chapter 167 when Reggie was talking to Megumi. So he asked Megumi what he thought the Culling game was, and Megumi said it's a ritual for using cursed energy of the players inside of the barriers to take Japanese people to the other side so they are no longer human. And we'll go more into that aspect of it a little later, but going further, Reggie says, I think that what you just said about using players' cursed energy is a bluff, or rather it's a second or third plan, and I think that for three reasons: the number of players, the differing levels of player skill, and the barrier rules. And he basically goes on to say that there's like a big discrepancy in the power among the players. Among like 100 players in each colony, there's only like a handful that are really strong, and ultimately that purpose is to get rid of the weak players so that only the strong remain. And Megumi says the strong weed out the weak early on. So you're saying that the game will reach a deadlock quickly. And Reggie says here in Tokyo Colony number 2, that's already happened. And we also see this actually play out in a Kotu stretch of chapters in the Sendai Colony. Because when he gets there, it kind of comes to a deadlock between the 4 strongest sorcerers, and they all don't really want to act on each other because some of them are bad matchups for each other and vice versa. And it ultimately comes down to a Kotu being the catalyst for them to all start fighting. And I think that was Gege kind of giving us a preview as to what's to come with Sukuna. And speaking of him, going a little further, Reggie says that you can be certain that Kenjaku will drop a bomb when only the strong remain, and then the Culling game will have served its purpose. And what is that bomb? Well, you guessed it. It's Sukuna. And why is it Sukuna? Because Kenjaku pretty much told us that he was. Because back in chapter 53, when he's talking to the cursed spirits, Jogo suggests like just straight up kidnapping Yuji. And Kenjaku says no, Itadori and Sukuna himself are a bomb to us and to Jujutsu High. We shouldn't set it off until the moment we need the most chaos. And that could be construed as the moment that we saw with Sukuna in Shibuya, but that was kind of just a taste, and also a little preview of what is to come, because this obviously lines up with what Reggie was talking about, which means that when the Culling game is coming to its final stages and only the strongest players are left, that's when Sukuna is going to come out and everyone will be forced to fight against him. And that is when the whole big in-chain binding vow is going to come into play. Because in chapter 11, when Sukuna makes that binding vow with Yuji in exchange for, bringing him back to life and regenerating his heart, he says, I have 2 conditions. You agree to let me take over your body for 1 full minute when I chant and chain. Number 2, you will forget this agreement. And then Yuji's like, no way. But then Sukuna says, what if I promise I won't kill or hurt anyone during that minute? And then Yuji eventually agrees to this. And the whole part about him not killing or hurting anyone during that minute is super important, because this is like the big bomb drop moment. Sukuna needs to make the most use of that minute, and he doesn't really need to kill or hurt anyone, because this is the big moment where I assume that he is going to become self-autonomous or just straight up separate from Yuji. And another thing that makes me think that this was always the plan is because of Kashimo and his motivations in the Culling game. He's only interested in seeing Sukuna, right? And I speculated that it's because Kenjaku told him that if he made this deal with him, became a cursed object, 400 years later he would eventually be consumed by a suitable host, and he would participate in the Culling games where he would get a chance to face Sukuna. And that is very true, because if Kashimo does survive enough to make it to the end, he will fight Sukuna because he is the inevitable final boss. And Kenjaku wants this because he wants forced evolution of all of the remaining strongest sorcerers against Sukuna. And this goes back to chapter 3 when Gojo was talking about Sukuna back in the day, because he says, in the golden age of Jujutsu sorcerers had sharpened their skills against him, but were ultimately defeated. So Kenjaku wants to do this again, but updated for the future in the Culling game. Now, it isn't going to be that simple, because I don't think Sukuna is like subservient to Kenjaku. They're both working together for their own individual goals. And clearly Sukuna has a big interest in Megumi, which still hasn't been revealed yet. And Kenjaku is aware of this because it goes back to when he was talking to the curses in chapter 53. He says there's something about Sukuna that doesn't align with what I was expecting. It's just a theory, but there's a landmine for Sukuna among the students, and in this panel we see Megumi. Pretty sure Sukuna isn't going to be cool with just being used as a pawn in Kenjaku's ultimate plan, and Sukuna is eventually going to use Megumi as some kind of foil as to what's going on. Let's just say that everything goes according to Kenjaku's plan, and the game ends with everyone dying or everyone evolving, and there's only one person left in theory. But even then, I don't think that's necessarily the end, because Kenjaku says that the Culling game will only end once all the players die. But regardless, hypothetically at that point, the line of barriers that are formed by the Culling game colonies will have completely bypassed through Japan, successfully sending every single person to the other side and forcing their evolution. And that goes back to Kenjaku's ultimate goal for humanity, which Tengen says is to force the evolution of all human beings throughout Japan. And the method of evolution that Kenjaku has chosen is merging humankind with Tengen. That's because at this point, Tengen has evolved too much. As we saw 11 years ago, he wasn't able to successfully merge with the Star Plasma Vessel because Toji killed her. So because of Tengen's immortality curse technique, it forced this evolution into him becoming this abstraction. He says that he is now one with the world itself, so I guess you can think of him as like sentient atmosphere. But he's also become more of a cursed spirit than anything, which makes him susceptible to Kenjaku's cursed spirit manipulation curse technique that he got from inhabiting Geto's body. So once Kenjaku is successfully able to absorb Tengen, he will then fuse all of the people in Japan that in this scenario have evolved because the Culling game has succeeded and the barriers have completely passed through Japan. And according to Tengen, a human who merges with him will transform into something greater than a sorcerer, as a new being that is both there and not there. But in this case, it won't be a single person, it will be 100 million people in Japan, all simultaneously becoming the vessel for Tengen. And Tengen says, if humankind evolves, and even if only one person rages out of control, the world will end because there will be no boundaries between individuals. So the evil would spread instantaneously. This pretty much means that he would create like this hive mind of all of the people in Japan. So one raging out of control would spread to all of them. And according to him, the world would end because of this. And then Yuji asks, like, why would Kenjaku do that? And Tengen says, I don't know. So we might be able to know why he wants this, because if we go to chapter 136, when Kenjaku is talking to Tsukumo, he says, it lies in optimizing cursed energy. I do not wish for a world without cursed spirits, or an idyllic and peaceful world. Non-sorcerers, sorcerers, cursed spirits, there are all possibilities of cursed energy in the form of human beings. And yet, there must be more to human potential. What I can create does not exceed the bounds of my own potential. The answer is always flickering darkly in chaos. Do you understand? What I should have created was chaos that not even I could control. So that kind of lines up with what Tengen is talking about here, making this one big weird Tengen hive mind that will in theory implode upon itself. And I don't know if that literally will end the world, like the world will explode or humanity is completely gone, or that will just leave all of the strongest sorcerers. And that could go back to what I said, Kenjaku's possible goal for the Culling game and Sukuna within it, forcing all of the remaining strongest sorcerers to evolve against him. So maybe they don't necessarily all die, but he's only left with like this pseudo utopia of only the strongest, most evolved sorcerers. And it will take it back to a perfect version of the Heian era, because that goes back to what Kenjaku says at the end of chapter 136 when he says, are you listening, Sukuna? It is beginning once again, the world of Heian, the golden age of curse techniques. So it's all a little confusing right now. I mean, go figure, it's Gege's writing after all, but I don't think it's that simple as to where he just wants the world to end. It's possible that maybe Kenjaku wants to inhabit the body of the Culling game winner and then absorb the hive mind consciousness of humanity fused with Tengen, and then he himself becomes this single thought entity that, I don't know, transcends evolution and becomes the ultimate enlightened being or something. I don't know, but that's pretty much what's going on here for the most part. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. And if you like the video, guys, please give it a like. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.